So we'll start with your full name.
Okay, is Herman Starks.
Okay. And where and when were you born?
I was born in the city of Detroit, 19 April 1969.
What is your connection to Black Bottom? Did you live there? Did you work there? Did you socialize there? Give me a little bit of background of your connection to Black Bottom.
Well, well, my grandmother took me in to raise me, my great grandmother to be exact, at 6 months old. At 6 months old, and we were on um I think of the street in a second, but we was over off 75. Well, it wasn't 75 actually. It was Mack and um in the Mack Russell area where we lived at the time, and they got relocated because they was building up, so they bought homes and relocated folks, and we ended up being relocated down to the Martin Luther King apartments. They were freshly built, newly renov, built and whatnot, and so they moved people over in there. And I happened to be with my great grandmother, who was retired at the time, of that uh, move. So this was roughly when we moved in there, like 71, 72. I was a kid, small child. So I'm not sure. It was either 71 or 72. I can't be clear about. I want to say it was 72. I started school over in that area, living in 2261 East Larned was our address, which is right there off Larned and Shane, a block over from Jefferson and Shane.
Okay.
Yep.
So your family, they moved from there, but what is their, do they have a great migration story? So prior to coming to this area, where were they prior to coming to Detroit? Because so many people came from the South. Did they come up from the South?
Yeah, well, my grandmother and of course my great grandmother were born in Alabama. Um, they was around Mobile, Aliceville, and those two cities that I can recall in conversation. Is kind of where they were from. Um, there. My mother was born in Michigan, so my grandmother married a white guy, and her kids were by this white guy, Austin Powers. I know the name Austin Powers, of course, but that was her dad. That was his name, Austin Powers. And so they moved up here running away from all the opposition that they had as being a white and black couple in the South. They moved to Michigan. My grandmother's I mean my mother was born in 1953 here in the city of Detroit, and I was born in 1969. So just from that perspective. And they was now from what I recall, they were on the east side. Now my great grandmother, when she came up here to help my mother and grandmother, I go with let me better yet, let me say that correct. She came to help her daughter, my grandmother, with her children, because she had three girls. She came up here roughly around sometime in the 50s. I can't give you a specific date, but she definitely came in the 50s. Um, and she worked in the hospitals, the old original General Hospital. Uh, she worked there, adult, I guess it's the receiving hospital in the emergency trauma center. She worked there and then retired there. So by the time I came in 69, um, she was retired because she was like 60, I want to say 65, 66 years old at my birth. And so she took me in to raise me because I had a teenage mom, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
so she raised me. So immediately 2 or 3 years after I was living with her, we moved from there to the Martin Luther King apartments because of the relocation.
Okay, that makes sense. So what you were really young. So what did your great grandmother tell you about her experience growing up and the parts that you remembered as well?
I mean,
Bottom.
outside of the numbers. They ran the numbers. They did that kind of stuff, and
But
she walked
clarify for
everywhere.
me, for people who don't know what the numbers are, clarify what that is.
Well, it was the lottery, the street lottery before it was the national lottery that it is. It was under the table, underground lottery system that they ran, primarily garnered by from what I know, the Italian, the mafia families or whatever was doing that. So I know my great grandmother and my grandmother had their affiliations. I know Coleman Young. And my grandmother, my mother's mother, they kind of went to school together, so they kind of grew up together. So a part of them migrating up here, they had they owned a private network, um, and they hung out and they talked and discussed, and for years, I remember as a kid, going over to this big old space was the mansion. Come to find out later, um, didn't mean much to me. It was just another space. It was just huge. But they went over. They would go over there. They would talk and had a conversation. His first cousin, Claude Young, was our family medical doctor. That was my grandmother's doctor. That was my mother's doctor, and that was my doctor as a infant kid. That we came up under. So we was there was a network, and that network that was Coleman Young as the mayor of Detroit, his cousin as a medical doctor was a part of that. So we was in that circle of influence, I guess, if you say, traveling from the south up here. Um, so a lot of stories, about the migration, about the plant, the opportunities that existed in the plant, why they came, what was going on there, especially being my grandmother being a white, I mean, being a black, and her husband at the time being white, and then having children with him. That was just like a taboo, coming
Did
from
they
the
live
South up
together
here.
in Black Bottom?
Oh, yes, yes,
Okay.
yes, yes. Yeah, they lived together. Um, Well, I'm not. You know what? Let me correct myself. I'm not sure if they was actually in the Black Bottom. I do know they live not far from the Black Bottom. I know they've, of course, hung out in the Black Bottom because of that's where the music scene was, entertainment scene, and all that. So they definitely hung out there, ran numbers there, stuff like that. Cause I was conceived on 29th Street, so that wasn't like 5 minutes from the Black Bottom. So like 29th and I think Lovett, Scott and Lovett, right up in there, depending if you're familiar with those areas. Uh 5 minutes from Tiger Stadium, over in that area is kind of where I was conceived at in the number streets. And that's where she died at, in that exact area. My grandmother did. So that's kind of, you know, I wouldn't have been in the Black Bottom with my grandmother had I stayed with my mother, because my mother never lived east. She's always lived west, right in that area.
So you were talking about the numbers, you're talking about your grandmother living there. Do you remember any of the businesses or the experiences that she would have had engaging with community then?
So my mother, which would be the person to talk to, but my mother, they hung out with a lot of the people, the entertainers, um, that performed in those areas. We had uh, other additional cousins that came out of like the Brewster projects that was down up in there, that was our kin folks that that I know we would go and visit, that they lived there, and was in, every aspect of the Black Bottom, if that makes sense. She talked about, I ain't gonna say project life, because it was a step up for them. What we deem as being project, it was a step up for our people coming from where they came from, with
Right,
running water and electricity and the different things that they had available, the job opportunities and stuff like that that they had available. But she talked about that, and then I remember is my young age, 2 years old, maybe whatever, going down to the projects, to the Brewsters, hanging out, at Ken folks' house and stuff like that. But she talked a lot about the struggle. She talked a lot about how she would go um to get food for, it was a church off of Russell that I can recall she talking about. Um it was like Russell and Mack. It was an old, I would assume it was an old Catholic church that she would frequent to get, food and help, to make sure that it was food on the table.
right,
And different little things of that nature that was right in the area where she lived at. But definitely my mother and my aunt, because they young, they not too much older than me. Again, my mother was
right. 16.
15, 14, 15 years old when she had me. So, she understood that, growing up there. And hanging out at her grandmother's house, which is my great grandmother, hanging out at
Mhm.
her grandmother's house. So she's seen all that that was happening during that time. They talk about it, pretty much they conversations with they went to the club, to the jazz clubs, on the scene. They seen, what they seen. They would talk about the pros and cons of it. The when they had fun, they talked about that, and then the other side of it was the street life and wasn't so great, and that was to educate myself and my siblings about being responsible and not getting caught up in the streets and stuff like that.
All right. Um, what once you realize that you were living in, I mean, sometimes people don't realize the environment they're living in until they're out of it. What did these stories and knowing that you were part of this significant area, what did that end up meaning to you and for you?
I mean, I guess in conversation piece, cause it wasn't no uh we never got no benefit from it as it relates to job opportunities or none to that extent. Um, you know, as being an intelligent individual now, looking at it, we was taken advantage of. We wasn't given opportunity. We was taken from um, to advance them. It never was to advance us. So from that perspective, I it hasn't been that type of benefit. Now, I will say this here, looking back from an educational standpoint, if those schools that I was in, Duffield, Miller, Martin Luther King, if they put money there for it to be to hire teachers that was different than the other neighborhoods, then that was the benefit. But if we had equivalent, which it looked like when you look at funding and different things of that nature, there was no benefit staying other than we was downtown. Um, there was no benefit, in that regard. Now, I my benefit in talking to people, at different levels, saying that this is where I was from, um, and maybe they had somebody that lived down there from that conversation that maybe experienced the gentrification, because that's really what that was. That was another, to me, looking at it, that was another form of tearing up um, people of color growth, because they took a thriving community, tore it up, put a freeway straight through it, and move people to wherever they wanted to move them to. Um, it was just wrong. And then, no offense, even talking about now, they want to come back years now for them. It ain't for us. That what they're doing, this project, that we even talking about, it ain't for us to benefit. It's for them because they got it in their mind. They want to do something else that's going to benefit them. Nothing too much about downtown has benefited people of color. It's been almost 97, 98% white. When you look at who's benefited from it, you look at who owns businesses down there, downtown, etc. is, I'm talking about actually own and making some money, it's about 97, 98% white folks or other ethnicities, not us. And let me correct myself because we've been using this term people of color, and I think it's wrong. It worked during the 70s when it worked, because it was black folks in essence what they was talking about. That's no longer the I think the case. I think in this time in 2025, people of color don't represent us as Black America. We're not getting those benefits. Not that we really got much of it, but what we did do, they've taken that and given it to everybody else but us. So I'm not necessarily happy about it, but again, they took this move was done during COVID while people was not paying attention. People thought they was gonna die. They weren't thinking about nothing about you putting a freeway somewhere. It wasn't even on their mind to even be able to properly comprehend the seriousness and the impact that this move is going to make. Now people paying attention. They're like, well, who was at these meetings? Who said, people asking questions now, but look how far down the line. And it appears that there's nothing that we can do other than maybe try to tell a story, have some information out there. It's not even mandated if you look around the country that they give um, black folks conversation in schools in our educational system. They don't even want to talk about that no more. And now with the DEI, the DIA, excuse me, the equity, no, DEI, excuse me, the diversity, equity, and inclusion. Since they counsel that now, they don't have to talk about it. And quite frankly, they the one been telling us to get over it anyway. So they don't want to talk about it. And so now that they don't have to talk about it, they don't have to hire us. And this thing about merit based, I had a question. I said, well, what does it mean merit based? Most of us still don't have education. So if you talk about merit based, what processes you using to qualified as merit based other than someone having degrees, education standpoint, that means we gonna be cut all the way out now at this particular point because most of us is not educated. When you think about Black America, we're not educated. Unfortunately, I think the Spanish Mexican population, I think they've cut their own throat because they stood in a sense they was benefit more than we was with the this equity and inclusion, etc. The LGBTQ and all them, they benefit more than us. However, it looks like they voted for the wrong guy because his plan don't support them. He put them out the country. He's cut the LGBTQ. We might stand a chance of rising back up, in a sense because we are actual citizens here with human rights. So it just depends. It's a lot to make of this new conversation that's happening, and we're gonna see it in the next 4 years. But and I'm not knocking it because I think this and I got to be frank with you. As a product of the late 60s coming out of the civil rights movement, I think we did a disservice to ourselves, trying to include ourselves in a society with people that didn't want us. And we have been victimized by that, maybe to our own doing, wanting to be a part of them too much when we had our own stance. We just wanted to be left alone and treated with respect. That's all. That's what we wanted. Um, this might be a way for us to get back to ourselves if we can, because the devices that exist and has, I think, been put in place, it has separated us, from even the government assistance. The assistance that they gave separated our homes. So we'll give you $1, but you're gonna have to put the father out the home. And look at it, they never came back. When you look at uh, the number one uh, race in America that had a husband and a wife in the home, a father and mother in the home, that was us. We're at, I think the last notice was about 17%. How we go from 80, 90% to 17, home ownership from I think it was 80, 70, 80% to less than 10% in home ownership. Oh, that could only happen by design. And so just to me is just another attack and another opportunity for them to build out to perform their wealth. Because when we look at um, billionaires that have taken the White House, the power, the base, that the only I think entity that would even check them and keep them in some type of order was the power of the government. They just gave that seat away. That seat is gone. And these rules and laws that's about to happen now, we'll see who benefits from it, but most of us are not educated enough to get the real true benefits. That's my thought about it.
So when you talked about the freeway running through that community that you lived in, and how did your grandmother maintain those relationships once that was destroyed? Was she able to hold on to some of the relationships that she had? Do you remember friendships that she still had that she was able to maintain once you moved?
Um,
Did she go to church still in the area?
yeah, we had to catch 3 buses. Our church was actually on Oakland and Holbrook, right on the corner, Thomas Temple. Our church was on Oakland and Holbrook, and we went there my entire life. I grew up in the church. Yeah, we went, but it was especially in the wintertime, it was some waiting at the bus stop that we would get out of church. We wouldn't get home in these cold Sundays. In the wintertime, we wouldn't get home until it was late. It was eight. Talking about cold, freezing. It was a horrible experience for me going to church. And church should be positive, but it was once we stepped outside of the church to get back home. We had 3 buses. We had to take, you know, uh, the Oakland, them buses ran slow. Of course, taxpayers' money, it ran slow. So we trying to go from Claremont to Woolward, catch that bus Woolward to downtown to catch a bus. Lock now downtown was better because you had the Mack. We had options. As far as the Cadillac, the Jefferson, the Wool. I mean the Cadillac. Well, Jefferson, Cadillac, Mack, Shane. The Lafayette. We had those different options. The Cadillac being the closest because that was right on our street. Jefferson being one block over, and then the Mac, Lafayette, or the Shane being, several blocks over, of course, you know, but it still was 3 buses
Mm,
on a Sunday
yeah.
coming
Yeah.
out of church at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, dark, that kind of stuff. I remember somebody stole my grandmother's purse. We was out there. It just, it wasn't good, and that's where we went to church. That was what her comfort zone was taking us there to go to church in that regard. I remember visitation. She only had that I remember growing up in our parking lot. She knew, several people in there, of course, because they was in the parking lot, the older folks and stuff like that. But outside our parking lot, one parking lot in the entire community, she didn't know none of them. So there was no relations. I knew more when I went to school, to start of school, because I went to school with, the other kids that were from different spaces, in the Martin Luther King apartments. But we didn't. And so when we went, tried to go catch the bus down to Mack and uh, Helen, Grand Boulevard area, um, up in there and some of the other spaces. Now, where she went while I was in school, I don't know. But just on me, we didn't go a lot of places because there was a distance, and she never drove my entire life, so she never drove no vehicle. Um, we was always by bus or walking.
Walking, right. So were you aware of when you were moving, were you aware, was there a conversation in your house about running the freeway through the neighborhood? Did you ever recall them having that conversation? Hey, we're gonna have to move because this is what's happening. Do you recall that and what that
I don't
con?
recall about that. I just recall where we were, where we ended up at, and I know they weren't happy about it.
Okay.
Uh, they was definitely dissatisfied, but they didn't have the wherewithal to do anything about it. And I think a part of that was the reason why Coleman Young ran and became mayor and won that, because he was able to motivate people, that we need a voice, because we had not up to that point had a qualified voice. Whomever was there, they didn't do a good job in representing, defending us to ensure that that did not happen. It happened under the watch of those and the white bureaucrats, that was there, both Republican and Democrat. They weren't our friends. They were their own friends for their own purpose. So when we finally got someone of color that we felt we could trust, and then our family knew him, of course, they came up here together, and then from what he went through the military, he could identify with the problems and the struggles of Black America, because he dealt with it. If that makes sense, he was Black in America,
Right.
that went through the military and other things.
So you were talked about not having a car because so that's a hardship. Were there any other hardships that you face as a result of having to move from what you had known?
I wouldn't know pretty much because I was so young. I couldn't identify what they may have or may not have been.
Mm.
Whatever food that we had, I don't know how hard uh, it was to obtain it. I know, again, I lived with my grandmother. She retired, so all she had was her Social Security and pension. That I do remember her check on the first and the third. So she got two checks, and that's what we was able to live off of.
Well, you knew that
Um,
much.
I knew that because it came in the orange envelope. You know what I mean? And I knew at that time she paid, the rent and whatever else she had to do at that moment. Um, she did it from there. I know that's why they played the lottery. She needed some extra money, to do different things. I knew she borrowed money, to be able to sustain and get by. And, how it all looked, what the dynamics was. She wasn't a person that ran the streets, and because she was older, so way older, at that point at retirement age. So she wasn't a street runner or none to that extent. So I didn't experience that, her not being in a home. I didn't experience that. Not to say that my friends and people that had younger parents, what they experienced, but my parent, even though she was my great grandmother, I had a different experience. She couldn't work because she was retired, that kind of thing. So the income was limited, and we lived off what she had. So
Right.
whatever that benefit was, living in those apartments, low. I don't know if it was low income. I don't know what the deal was. It was what it was. Was it enough? No, but did we get by? Yeah. Again, she could definitely couldn't afford no car and all that it would have took to maintain a vehicle. No, that just wasn't even an option.
So sometimes we can't remember the details, but do you remember feeling happy? Do you remember having friends and feeling like your needs were met as a child? Like, did you feel joyful? What was your feeling like growing up?
I was fine. Um, the way I was raised, I didn't ask for a lot, if that makes sense. I didn't ask for a lot. Um, I had a mother, a young mother, and the times, for the most part, that I uh asked for small things, I got them. Um, but it wasn't a lot of times, because I realized my mother was young. I kind of from, not sure how, but my grandmother taught me to be mindful, to be appreciative of what you had, um, to live within your means, to be respectful in the sense of not wanting all this stuff. Don't be trying to be like the Joneses and all that. So I just early on, I knew not to ask. And so I didn't. I asked for a bike, some simple. Um, I can only remember one or two times that I asked for something. My first party that I can recall, I was 13. So not all that you getting a party every year. No, that didn't happen. They say happy birthday every year, but not a party every year, if that makes sense. So, um, my experience, again, I was with my grandmother and I knew I was with my grandmother. Um, and I know we went shopping once a month, you know, because of the first and the third, whatever. We went shopping to buy stuff, our food. And maybe in the middle of the month, she might have went to get something else, maybe some eggs or something like that. Um, whatever the struggle was, you ate what they cooked. So it was just a different way. I didn't know what a struggle was because I had something to eat. It might have not, I didn't have a request unless she asked me, and that wasn't a lot. She just cooked it, and whatever she cooked, I ate, if that made sense. So I didn't have a choice of being picky. So that's why I don't understand. Um, well, I ain't gonna say I don't understand. That's why I don't have in my mind of a time that we struggled, if that makes sense, because it was something to eat. Might not have been a lot, but it was something to quench your thirst. And we was raised with respect. You didn't ask. If you just said you was hungry, they'd get you something to eat, and you ate it. And that's just what it was.
So how do you think present day Black Detroiters are impacted by the destruction of Black Bottom Paradise Valley? How do you
Oh,
think?
that's clear.
Yeah, explain that
That's
to me.
clear to me. We didn't grow up with no folks that own anything. Um, most of us didn't grow up with families that owned a home, barely owned a car. If they had a car, it was beyond raggedy, if that makes sense. Um, what we saw and the harmful thing, what I think was harmful, the folks that we seen that actually had something that looked good were your dope dealers, people of the streets, if that makes sense. Your pimps, players, hustlers, dressing, because they had the money. So we, as kids being influenced, they look better than our parents. They look better than what we had. So the people that actually from the Black Bottom that had stuff that really worked for had clubs, had stores, and different things of that nature, we didn't get a chance to meet them. We didn't get a chance to know them. We couldn't emulate what we couldn't see. And what we did emulate is what we saw: pimps, players, hustlers, dope dealers, going in and out of jail, confusion, drug addicts, dope, alcoholics, fighting, prostitution. That kind of was the regular, and even when you think about jobs, it wasn't careers. Outside of the plant, it wasn't too many folks that we knew. You might find somebody that might have been a nurse. No doctors. I never met a doctor in my entire time. None until I was an adult, well beyond there. But never met nobody that had a mother or father or uncle or anybody that was a doctor. That really, one or two people that might have had their own business. It wasn't a lot of that. So the impact, we wouldn't know it because we was too busy in the mix. But when you look back and be like, how is that possible? Nobody had a business. Nobody had a real substance career outside of going to the military to run around and put your life on the line, potentially not come home. You got to kill somebody, and then you had the streets of Detroit. So kill somebody here or get killed. You know, the big four I thought about the police, they not our friends. We was told to make it home, run. Don't let them pull you over because you might not make it home. So they was not a role model. Um, you know, just from that angle, and I'm sure I thought about it as a kid. We all probably did, looked at it. We had no real role models. And I think even though we knew Coleman Young, we was grateful for him, but I don't think most of them thought that we could ever be a Coleman Young. Just real talk. Not
So,
not none of the conversations that I had. The most
right.
I was identifying with an athlete or sports, because you know we could excuse me, we could play football, baseball real good. That was a easier access,
Mhm.
more likely than not. You know, we could do something to that extent. You could go to the military, you could play football, baseball, but talking about being a politician or you know being a mouthpiece for your community, those were not our models,
Mhm.
not at all. You know, we heard about um, Stokely Carmichael and all the work that they did, the Black Panther, but that was violent. My knowledge and thought about that now that I understand different than what they did. But we talking about I was well into my late 30s maybe before I really realized what they did, and that the narrative that was portrayed and put out here by the media was a lie. It was propaganda. We, you know, who was gonna tell us something different? You know, you trust the sources where it come from, but come into realization that you can't trust that because look who own it. So they giving you or forcing you to think a certain way based on what information that they putting out. They they're liars, you know, in that regard, you know, perpetrating, you know, even today, and I noticed this a lot many years ago. We can have homicide incidents, crime in our communities. The same crime in their community won't be talked about, but they would drill. Even when they talk about a crime in Metro Detroit, as they call it, the suburbs, they call it Metro Detroit, though, they're going to show an image of your face and my face of dark complexion. They're going to show our black women being rude, arrogant, you know, being, you know, they're going to catch them in the worst moment and put it on TV. They're going to catch us. They're going to put a picture of us with a sign, you know, we locked up with the prison thing and all that. But when a crime occurred in their community, they not, it's going to be a long time if you ever see a picture of them. And when they talk about Metro crime, Metro Detroit crime, it's going to be a picture of one of us. And they still do that to the day. And this is 2025. They got to do it now more because there are people committing mass murders. We don't commit mass murders. They commit mass murders. They go and blow stuff up and kill 99,000 people. But it's been by far when you look at 100 to 1, maybe 100 to 2 incidents. Two of us maybe then did something stupid at that level, maybe, and we don't can't confirm whether they telling the truth or not. But the other 98, guaranteed, is no doubt that they've committed these types of crimes, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, the impact is there. It exists. We've been dogged and treated bad, and the narrative that's out there, you know, most of us know it, but what is it that we can do about it? You know, we don't know how.
So if you could imagine, you know, right now there's conversation around what should happen with 375. What do you think reparations for the destruction of Black Bottom should look like in the redevelopment of I-375? Because that's the area. Like, so if you could just wave a magic wand and people were able to have things to repair the damage done, what do you think that should look like?
But see, we talk about reparations, that's a difficult question in so many, it's complex because you don't even know who the renters were because everybody didn't own stuff, but they still were relocated. So you don't even know who all the renters were. Um, and
Well, let me
I,
help you with it a little bit. So some people have imagined putting a park there, putting a memorial to what happened there, or like what would you do with that? Like you're given free will to do whatever you
oh
want with that 375 area. What
no,
would
I
you do?
understood the question. No,
Yeah.
I understood the question. I just sorry, I don't see no value in that.
Okay.
That's why I was struggling with trying to find what to say. You took some, replace it with some. That ain't giving none to the people that took the loss. To see an image or to see a park that I can walk. They got many parks, and it is what it is. They treat dogs better than they treat humans. So I don't see a value in that. If it was a dog, they'd be talking about, well, come get a $10 gift certificate. I'm just saying, I'm just throwing something up there. They'll give you something. Um, they're not talking about, if I had a wand, I would say uh create a fund since y'all want it, and monetize it and give them something, to say, we can't go back and correct the wrong that clearly was done, but here's a fund, um, uh, free college. I'm talking about something that can mean something. You can go to school for 4 years and get a degree. You can get a trade for free, don't cost you nothing. I don't care how old you are, you can go back, you can get a 4 year degree, you can get a trade that you can use in life or that you can pass down, or you can get a 0% interest loan to start a business, you know, something like that. If I had a wand, that's what if that's what it would be, something of that magnitude, some because that was a magnet, the impact was magnitude, it has to be equivalent. So I would say something of that magnitude, degrees, opportunity, full degrees, trades, loans, zero interest loans, because of what they benefited from it. Hell, that's the least they could do, I think.
Right. Okay. So these last few questions are reflection questions. Um, you talked a lot about your grandmother and how you remember her and what she had to do, but how would you want to be remembered for the work that you're
Myself,
doing? Yeah, you.
um I'm a connector. I'm an individual that has always strived to help people, to connect people with proper resources, to connect people with opportunities, to get people along the way, because I needed that and I didn't have that. I didn't have them opportunities. So I had to create it for myself. And so I would want to be remembered, for uh, connecting people and getting them to the next level in their life that could change their life, for the better.
And what is most important for future generations to remember about Black Bottom and Paradise Valley? What do you want them to remember?
Um, Remember the desecration, just like when they, Hiroshima, they dropped a bomb, to remember the fact that, um, you know, we persevered beyond that moment, but we were, uh, they dropped a bomb in our community and exploited us and took advantage of us. Remember that, and remember, um, um, to trust no one but yourself. That pay attention. Again, 2020, they dropped a bomb on our community with coronavirus. Just as an example, and they exploited that moment to be able to get the right to build this. They didn't get the consensus of the whole community. They did not, because the whole community was unaware, thinking that hell, the world was about to end. So they did it again for their cause, for their advantage. So it's like, remember those powers to be, you can't trust them, and don't pay attention. That's just my advice. Pay attention, because they have never shown that you can trust them.
Why do
Money,
you think it's important? Yeah, why do you think it's important for the histories of Black Bottom, Paradise Valley to be passed on to future generations? Why is it important that we tell these stories?
that we had something, that we was about more than the negativity that exists, that we were business owners, we were people that entertained ourselves in the midst of, think about it, we was fresh out of slavery. We weren't that far out of slavery, weren't that far removed from coming out of slavery, coming out of civil rights movement. In that regard, during that time, I guess, leading into that, the benefits of the early 1900s, just yesterday from the 1900s, was slavery. So, um, yeah, remember, we were people of substance, that we come from people that persevered through hardship. So respect what you have and strive to leave a legacy that can sustain itself going forward, because that's a bad indication, because what we had was taken. What do we have today? So try to strive to build something to go forward. Otherwise, we just end up being the token or the beneficiaries of somebody else.
Right. So one final question is just if I have forgotten as I'm collecting your history, which again, I remind you that a recorded history is something that sticks around long after you're not here. Is there anything that you want to put on the record that I was remiss in asking you?
Um, I don't know, but I don't know how to answer that, but I think our focus point was about 375. It was about Paradise Valley. Valley. Um,
It's about
I-
375, about Paradise Valley, but it's
375.
about the people. And
Right, and
you,
I was gonna say that. I
yeah,
was gonna say that as being a descendant of the people, I would say we still, no matter what happened, we persevered. Um, we are around the world today. Um, I think um, the fire, the intelligence that exists within us allows us to be outspoken to the extent that we do. When you think about Detroiters, because most of Detroiters are descendants of Paradise Valley. No matter where we go, people know that we are from Detroit. I think just from the way that I swagger, the way that we dress, the way that we do anything that we do to speak the whole 9 yards, we give it 100%. We give our all. We are genuine individuals. My thing is the support that I would say, I would tell my people to respect that, to support that, and to protect that. Don't allow it to be the waters to be muddied, to be infiltrated, by anything and no one that's on the outside, and even what sometimes watch your own.
that's great advice, and thank you. So I just want to thank you for recording this oral history today. I want to ask you that if you in communication with your work in the community, that if you know anybody who has lived in this, in Black Bottom, that we could also speak to about recording a history, that you send them my way
I
because
told you I know a bunch of folks. Excuse me, my grandmother, um, where we lived at, the people that she knew, it was a family, one family in particular, quite a few of them actually, but one in particular, the Lakeys, um, Mama Lakey had about 13 kids.
wow.
And so all of them now are in they're my mother age. They're in their 70s. One of them may even be in their 80s, the one that's still living. All of them that grew up down there, that was there, that watched me grow up, as an example. I played with their children. Their children were my best friends, if not. So all of them, like I said, I went to Duffield, Miller King. So we all started preschool together. So their parents, the you had the Ralph Bunch homes and other housing uh facilities in that area. I grew up with all them kids. So some of them that was a few years older than me, because some of them is roughly, I'm 55, so some of them is in they uh early, early 65, 62. They was like our big brothers and big sisters. I know them. And then of course their parents, that kind of thing. So I know a bunch of folks. Like I told you, I think I mentioned to you, we have our own Martin Luther King Apartments. We have our own social media page, and there's quite a few of us there, over 1,000 plus people that grew up from. Uh, I think it's 71. I think it's from 71 on, up to whatever it is. That are members. We do a reunion every year. So we come together and we talk about our grandkids and stuff like that. Now our kids and stuff like that. So I could definitely, and I think I mentioned to you, that's not a problem. A lot of them, and a lot of them, when you get to, they can talk about some stuff because a lot of their uh, older siblings were in the nightlife of Black Bottom. They were part of Motown. They, like, listen to me very carefully. A lot of them participated in that. They siblings with their cousins and father. Like one of them in particular, Miss Lecky, one of her daughters, her son was my best friend. Her husband was a Motown singer. Her children's father he's a Motown legend, street guy, street legend. But no, they can give you some insight. You got, like, they can give you a lot, way more than what I can give you in that regard, because like I said, they like 70. Let me see, his mother got to be like 78. Because she had a son. He's deceased now, but when I was 10, he was in his 20s.
Okay.
So that means right now he would be 65, 67. Keith Lakey, which is well known out here, if you heard that name before. He's got to be 64, maybe 63, 64. A lot of these, well known, well established, in the community, from real estate. The black people that started the vet club, he, was part of that. He used to work at City Slicker. Remember that?
Mhm.
So he was a member, stock clerk at City Slicker, downtown Detroit.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, 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 yeah. I
Jeez.
seen, yeah. But yeah, he was back in the early 80s. He was a stock boy clerk at City Slicker, which was the Gator shop, for us, if you know Detroit wear Gators. Not
Mhm.
crocodile shoes as the men, stuff like that. But like,
So I guess the question is how, like, what's the most efficient way for us to get in touch? So what I can do is I can phone you, and if it means I can drop off some of the flyers to you.
what I would do, Wave, we digital. What
Yeah.
I would do is introduce you to the board of the MLK uh, alumni, is what we call it. I would introduce you to the board. They got telephone numbers and access to everybody. Now I just know the Lakeys personally because I grew up, literally with them. They looked out for me and watched me as a kid grow up. Those were my grandmother friends. They kids were my friends, so I know them directly. But far as overarching all the rest of them, far as telephone numbers, direct contacts, and stuff like that. Our alumni will have all of them. And when I'm talking about the black bottom is in that network. Everybody, they because they all came from the black bottom and they migrated to the King homes because that's where they put us at. And if you think about the King home complex, had to be about 1,000 people. So if
Right.
you so if you think 1,000 people come with two and three and four kids and all that. We talking about 4, 5,000 people and they kid. We up their numbers as it relates to that, and them coming out of the directly out of the black bottom. Some of them, I went to school with some of their parents was business owners like Singleton Cleaners. If you remember, I don't know if you remember Singleton Cleaners. That was a black neighborhood cleaners up on Mount Ellie. He had several different shops and all that kind of stuff. I went to school with these kids. We went to Miller together and stuff like that. So we have access to other people that were went to school with their kids, stuff
All
like
right.
that.